Hello, everyone. This Wednesday, July 15th, and for the first time in this show's very short history, it is Fight Day, which is kind of unique here. UFC on ESPN 13, featherweight matchup is the main event between Dan Ige and Cavalcater. But also today is the fourth episode of the Deep Water MMA Podcast. I'm your host, Northrup, and I'm joined by my co-host, Lucas Grandsire, and our guest, MMA Junkies, Nolan King. What's up, guys?
What's going on, man? Doing well.
Nothing much. Appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah. Obviously, quick turnaround for UFC 251, but I mean, it just seems like we were kind of talking about this last week, Lucas, too, just how the flow of MMA is definitely here now. We have another LFA card this weekend, 2 UFC cards tonight, and also on Saturday. How are you guys kind of doing in this, in the middle of this action-packed MMA week? And we'll start with Nolan.
Yeah, no,
it's all good. I'm hanging in there, man. It's been tough. Every week at Junkie, things get hectic towards the start of the fights. I mean, you get the media day, we crank out all that stuff, and then the weigh-ins the next day is a little hectic, and the calm before the storm, all the pre-fight stuff, and then the fight night. So to have 3 of these in 8 days has been a challenge for us. A lot of people are grinding. I mean, we have John Morgan out there on the ground, so he's doing all that stuff. But even with a full house of a full house of employees for MMA Junkie, it gets tough, man. There's just so much to cover. You want to give everybody their proper shine, and it's. I'm glad that we don't have to do this every week, but the fan inside of me still loves to see as many fights as I can. So I really can't complain.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's good for me because my content isn't based on, writing results and stuff. Like, I'm just looking at all these names to get to interview. So nothing too crazy. And like Nolan said, as a fan, it's cool to, get a bunch of these events. And hopefully these next few cards are a little bit better than the one we saw this past weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, we had that one little break, right before Fight Island. I remember that weekend, too. I was like, oh, good. It's a nice break. But then, as soon as that was kind of, ending, I was like, all right, I'm ready to get back into it. But I mean,
it's not slowing down anytime soon, man. We got August coming up every weekend. We got Contender Series. We have September booked, so it's going to be something we have to get used to. It's the new normal, I guess, is catching up.
Yeah, it seems like every day there's some kind of new announcement as far as fights go. And then now Bellator 2 with they announced Pettis and Bedejas yesterday, and Henderson Chandler as well. So, but on this show, too, we focus a lot on, MMA media and stuff. Obviously, we talk a lot about stuff that's going on in the sport, but we like to talk about just kind of media in itself and just different things like that. And we've had a great line of guests so far, James Lynch, Mike Heck, Michael Stetz, too. But for you, Nolan, too, just, being someone who's, a little younger, too, and in the MMA journalism game, was this always the path for you? Did you always want to get into, journalism in mixed martial arts?
No, not at all. I mean, this was not something that I even considered as a career choice up until about maybe, I don't know, probably about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. It was just something that I did for fun. I started with a Twitter account one day, just messing around. And, before you know it, I had a little bit of a following. And still at that point, I was like, man, I never considered it something I could do. I just was, there's so few opportunities or whatever. And it's, don't pursue that. Go with, go down the road of medical. I was in a pre-med program. So do that. That's where the money is. You'll work hard now and at least you'll have a job security, blah, 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 blah. And then as time went on, it just became more and more apparent to me that there's some opportunities arising. There were some people putting feelers out. And, once I started getting talked to by some of the bigger websites, just, way before I got the Junkie gig, just people trying to gauge interest or kind of see where I'm at or what kind of freelance things. I started to think, man, maybe this is something that you can do, and I think I was almost lucky in a sense that I didn't think this was something I could do. I wasn't afraid to fail. I was just like, if I fail, I still have my other career. So, man, it was something probably about a year before the Junkie gig, I decided that this was the road that I think was worth pursuing. And it's really about opportunity. And eventually with ESPN moving into the mix and investing in the UFC and The Athletic doing the same, it opened up the door for me and some other people to make the jump into the industry. And I'm so happy that I did. But it's a long roundabout way of saying to your first question, no, this is not something that I set out to do. It's something that I enjoyed. And I think when you enjoy something, it takes you a lot further than other people. It gives you a leg up. And I'm so privileged really to be able to do this as my full-time job.
And here's something that I'm curious about, Nolan. You said you went to school for pre-med. What's your family's reaction though? Because I imagine, like, I know if I tried to say, do kind of what you did, I'd get like hold on, we sent you to school for a reason. Like, what was the family's reaction?
Yeah, I mean, they were cool with it. I mean, I think that they always know that, I have my degree. Like, I graduated. I went through all the pain and misery of getting a pre-med degree like that. So, I think they're totally fine with it. I mean, they know that this is something that I'm passionate about. I think they recognize that, I seem to have a good following, and relative to this industry, I think that I've accomplished a good amount, and I think that they recognize that. So I think being happy is a big part of what they're setting out for me to be able to do. And I'm comfortable. I'm making a living. And, sure, if I'd done 6 more years of school and became a doctor or something, sure, I'd be having some good money coming my way, or some better money, I should say. But totally comfortable with where I'm at right now at 24. And, again, if anything ever happens, I still have that degree and I can go on for some further schooling.
Yeah. I know you say you kind of like were playing around with like Twitter and things like that, but like, was MMA like, I mean, how long has that been like an interest like in your life?
So, I mean, really I was a very casual fan, probably, I remember like watching a card once here and there. I'd watch the tough marathons that were on sometime on Spike. I remember like, one day I was sick home from school and I banged out like the whole season with Michael Bisping on it. But I wasn't really a diehard or anything. And I think maybe once around the time that Kimbo Slice started getting into it, I was like, oh, I got to like check him out. And I caught the Seth Petrozelli fight. And I saw Kimbo's debut in the UFC. And right around that same time, the UFC announced that they were coming to Boston for the first time. And something that I'd always wanted to go to, like, just for the spectacle of the sport, like, hey, something different. I've been to a Bruins game and a Celtics game and a Red Sox game. Like, might as well check UFC off the list. And I think in the preparation mentally for getting ready for that event, I bought the video game kind of. I was playing that a lot, and I learned a bunch of the fighters. And then they had the UFC Fan Expo that year, so it kind of really took off for me. And it was a really great stretch of events too. You had Cain Velasquez and Lesnar around that time. You had Sonnen versus Silva, or the comeback around that time. So it really hooked me, man. And I'm somebody that really, when they like something, they don't really go halfway in. So I became pretty obsessed with it pretty quickly, learning all the fighters and their records and memorizing and looking at odds and doing predictions and stuff. So since 2010, it's really been a major part of my life. And, sure, it took me 9 years to figure out what I wanted to do with it other than just having it be a hobby or watching MMA be a hobby. So, yeah, I've been a fan for about a decade now. This is my decade year. And, yeah.
And so how did the stuff with MMA Today happen? Because I know at one point your Twitter account, the big thing, the big reason why I followed it was, you announced every matchup. So it was like really convenient. But then we start seeing you with MMA Today and your name starts getting bigger and bigger. How did that stuff kind of happen?
Yeah. So, it is pretty strange. Like, I think I started out, just kind of, there was nowhere as a fan that I could really go besides, checking out the Sherdog lineups or something, where in terms of social media, where I could go and look at and find all the fights for the upcoming UFC events. Like, MMA Junkie did a great job of putting out, 75% of them, and MMA Fighting did a great job of putting out 75% of them. But there was nowhere that had every single fight announcement I felt that you could get in real time from every source. So that was really the way that I started off, was just kind of, the Dallas newspaper got a couple of fights for the card coming up in Dallas. Like, I'll tweet that out. I'll give them credit right in the tweet about it. But, it's just something for fans that are more MMA centric than the people that read the sports page in Dallas, to be able to go to one place, see all the fight announcements at once. And from there, I think my account took off. It became pretty popular for that regard. And then I started kind of getting some information where, people would be like, hey, like, I saw you didn't put out this fight yet. And I'd look and there would be, that fight would be nowhere. So then it would become my own scoop. So yeah, that's kind of how that started. And then MMA Today, which was, for people that aren't familiar, was a site that merged with Cageside Press. It's essentially, I think Cageside took all of their social media followings and stuff and kind of took their roster too. So yeah, that was kind of a hobby site. I did that just for free, for fun. And it was something I just jumped into, figuring I could do it whenever I had time with my school. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. It gave me some experience. It gave me some live coverage experience. And just the general flow of how you have to do something when you write up an article. I mean, it sounds so simple probably to people that have never even written one, but there is a lot that goes into it, and you learn a lot as you go. And that gave me the platform to be able to do that.
Yeah. You mentioned you're a Celtics and Bruins fan. I would have never guessed.
No Red Sox flag yet. Making room.
There you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like, especially too now that, like you said, like, you know, you haven't been as far as like media for like that long, but I just feel like, especially like this week, just in general, like, I mean, this is always a thing as far as fans and backlash against media and things like that. But I just felt like we saw a lot of that this week, as far as like with the Holloway fight, like you saw Holloway kind of defending up here on like social media. But then also I just saw about Dominance MMA and Ali Abdelaziz, and he kind of blackballed ESPN for comments that Ariel Helwani said regarding just like a matchup. Like it didn't like, to me, it didn't seem like that big a deal, but for just being a member of the media, like what do you kind of make of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, MMA media and the fighters and the managers and coaches and whatever obviously have an interesting relationship. We're not like other sports where, you show up and the Celtics or the Bruins have their PR people, and no matter what happened, a player could have gotten arrested or drunk driven or whatever, and they have to be there and answer questions from the media. So it's a lot different of a setup in MMA where a lot of the access, or if you want to call it that, or a lot of the opportunities and ways that you set up interviews do go through managers. So it can provide some difficulties, obviously, sometimes when things become very emotional. I've been lucky where a lot of these type of scenarios that I've heard of don't involve me. Like, I've had very little issues with anybody ever trying to revoke access or whatever. And, I think that a big part of it too is that, there's certain ways that I like to go about my relationships with these managers and coaches and fighters, which is, a very professional level. I think sometimes when you give them, when you offer up a lot, or you're, you make it the norm that, no matter what, I'm going to have one of your guys on, or I'll have you on after every fight or whatever. And you start doing stuff like that, it can create some issues where, it's kind of the expectation, and it's not their fault. It's something that I think whenever there's any type of issue that I start to think I'm going down a road where, hey, I think that this person is, or source or manager or whatever is maybe kind of creeping into the territory where I don't feel comfortable with what's going on. I tell them, I say, hey, this is my role and responsibility. This is what I have to do. And this is why I can't, do whatever you're telling me or whatever. And I think a lot of times when you're honest with people, they understand where you're coming from. I'm not condoning any of the blacklisting that's going on or anything like that. I definitely think that that's a tough scenario to put the fighters in more than anything. But at the same time, we don't really know what goes on beyond that. And I think it's important to kind of get the full story before you make any type of judgment.
Yeah. And like, as far as like the Holloway situation too, like obviously that's different, but still,
Sure.
It was involved the media, kind of the backlash too. Just like for you too, like how do you handle those things too? Especially being someone who, like you said, it's kind of started on Twitter, so everybody's on Twitter, everyone has something to say. Like how do you kind of deal with that?
So you're talking about when Max came out and said that people were getting threatened, essentially? Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, man, like, I think there's been a lot more good people than bad. I think just don't feed into those people. Some people get very rattled openly about any type of messages they receive. Obviously, like, getting some type of specific death threat's a little different than somebody telling you that you suck in the comments, or that your mustache sucks in the comments. But, it's one of those things, like, everybody's going to have an opinion. Some people are going to go overboard with it, but at the end of the day, you go on a tweet or whatever, I'll announce, I joined MMA Junkie, and there will be, hundreds of favorites on it and retweets and whatever, and hundreds of nice comments. And then there's, 3 people that Twitter filters out, and you have to click on them to read what they're going to, what awful thing they're going to say to you. And to me, man, like there's a lot more love out there than there is hate. And I think that, like Max defending the media, everybody thinks that there's a big divide between media and fighters and managers. And sure, there's beef sometimes, but generally speaking, I think most people in the sport have been pretty good, at least from my experience, they've been pretty good to me. So really just don't get caught up on the few negative people or the people that say awful things or try to slide in the DMs and tell you something like that. It's just, for every one of them, there's 100 that are great people and are very supportive of what you do.
Something that I'm curious about, Nolan, obviously at one point, and even still now, you're working a lot with the prospect coverage, Dana White's Contender Series, all that stuff. How important has that been for your career, just in terms of building that relationship with the fighters? And I assume managers like that stuff too. Like, was that a very important part of helping you get to where you're at today?
It was huge, man. And it was, at the time, it was, again, I was going for who I could get. Like, I was going for, which fighters can I interview that I know will interview with me. And I never started off with like some type of elaborate plan, like, if I interview the guys now, then later on they'll remember, whatever. But it's just kind of the reality of the whole thing. And it's something that I figured out over time is like, covering the sport as a whole is very important. You look at other sports and college sports get covered or whatever. And so to kind of cover the minor leagues or the pre-UFC tenures that these guys have, I think is important for the entire sport. And I think the other thing is it's kind of become a niche. It was pushed to the side where people said, nobody's going to care about that stuff. Like we have our audience for the UFC, and even some of the UFC fighters' interviews don't necessarily do as good as others. So I think it was really just kind of neglected. And I kind of tapped into a market where, even bringing it to MMA Junkie, like I was kind of nervous about that coming into this, that my bosses would be like, hey, like, come on, like, you can do a couple of those things here and there, but like, let's focus on the big stuff. And they've been totally supportive. Any idea that I've pitched, they've allowed to happen. And I think that they've been pleasantly surprised too with some of the response that we've gotten from it. Readers seem very interested. And, the On the Doorstep series I do does great for us. Some of the other, 10 fighters that heavyweights you could see on Contender Series does really great for us. And I think when it comes to Contender Series coverage now, people go to MMA Junkie. So for me, I think it's been rewarding for everyone. And there's just a lot of lessons to be learned there. Find the things that are for anybody that's out there, younger media, find the stuff that nobody's covering, find something different, find a different way to look at something. And I think a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times you'll find something that people will be interested in just because you're the only one doing it.
Mm-hmm. And you like, just as far as like covering guys that are kind of coming up in the sport too, we had Mike Heck on 2 weeks ago, and he was kind of talking about the New England MMA scene too. So when you first were getting interested in the sport, like you said, like back in 2010 and stuff, were you going to like a lot of like regional shows too?
No, I would say that probably, in retrospect, that would be the natural progression, right? So the first event that I ever covered was a Bellator event. It was right after MMA got legalized in New York. It was out in it wasn't New York City. It was out in like Western New York somewhere. It was I don't remember if it was near Albany. I'm trying to remember. It was a casino. I don't know. They've held a couple of events there. I think it was oh man, this is bad. It was headlined by Koreshkov and Chidi Njokuani. And that was the first experience that I had in-person coverage-wise. And it was nerve-wracking at the time. I was nervous to do the scrums and everything. And, after that, that's when I realized, you can go get more practice doing CES down in Rhode Island. It's, an hour drive from your house. Why not do it? So that became a mainstay for me. Every time that Bellator would come to New England, to Connecticut, to Mohegan Sun, I would be there. And that's really how I built my live coverage. I got comfortable in the scrums. I got comfortable. I dabbled into some one-on-one interviews and stuff. On camera is still not my strength. It's probably the thing that I had the least experience with, coming into my Junkie gig. It's something that I continue to work on. But I felt like I rounded myself out when it came to everything else. So that's kind of where I started. I would encourage anybody, again, for people that are watching this, maybe that are trying to delve into MMA themselves, like, definitely get those reps in. I think that reps are super important. Even if it seems repetitive to you, there's a million things that can go differently, and lessons to be learned at each time that you go to cover these events,
And so one thing I'm curious about, and well, another thing I'm curious about, you mentioned that a year before MMA Junkie was kind of where you realized this was your career path. What did you do differently leading up to Junkie? Did you change anything at all? Like, did you have a certain approach to try to go full time? Like, what was kind of your plan there?
Well, I kind of figured that I had the working recipe. That was at that point was when I realized that for a while there when nothing was happening and I wasn't really making any progress out of the out of the freelance scene, like I said, I started to kind of get some signals that there was some interest in me from more mainstream sites. And I think from there, it kind of became obvious to me that, again, it's less about, am I good enough? And it's more about, you got to be around for the right opportunity, Sure, like you got to bring talents to the table and people aren't going to look at you unless you have a lot that you can bring to their site. But at the same time, I mean, we're in an industry where there's not a lot of full-time jobs. So, websites aren't going to just throw somebody out the window and hire somebody new unless they have a reason. So that's really a big part of it too. And I think that's maybe gave me a little more confidence to kind of kick me in the butt and say, hey, keep continuing what you're doing. You're progressing at a pretty good clip. Hunter Homesteck, who was with Flow Combat at the time, was super supportive and kind of backed my thoughts on that, hey, something big is going to come eventually. Just keep doing what you're doing. I just kind of stuck with it. I continued to, I kind of push the brakes on my other career, on my medical stuff. I, worked as an EMT at night. I would go work at my uncle's. He owns like a kitchen supply company. I'd work there a few days a week. And then the rest of my time I would spend doing stuff for Flow Combat and Tapology to kind of make a little more money and continue doing MMA things.
All right. So we'll move on to the next portion of the show, kind of a friendly debate. And I mean, after UFC 251, I think we definitely have a lot to talk about too. But one of the things that just kind of stood out to me, and I mean, I've heard a lot of people kind of talking about this, but as far as like the Jorge Masvidal, Kamaru Usman fight, everyone was kind of, throwing a little shade at Usman for his performance too. And, definitely, we're highly criticizing him. But, with a guy who just like tied GSP's record, 12 consecutive wins in that welterweight division, like a guy like Usman, a champion like Usman, does he deserve more praise? And we'll start with Nolan on this one.
100%, man. I think a lot of people look at that fight and they're critical of his abilities because it was boring, but it takes two fighters to have a boring fight, just like it takes two fighters to have an exciting fight. So I think a lot of the onus is on Masvidal too. He did a great job at defending the takedown, but you got to be able to do more than defend the takedown with Usman. You got to be able to get him off you and keep distance and keep up with his pace. And I think that Usman just essentially exposed those type of holes for Masvidal. And like you said, he's not getting the respect. It took GSP 14 fights to get 12 wins. It took Kamaru Usman 12 fights to get 12 wins. So I don't want to say that I think that he's, I think he's got a lot to do before he catches up to George's stature in the sport. But at the same time, he's well on his way. And I think, again, just because there was a boring fight, the guy's got to figure out how to stop him. I mean, it's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think for Usman, the problem that I think fans don't realize, there's that frustration of like, he's not going to go out there and stand in big. We're not going to get Poirier versus Hooker with Usman involved. Like, he's so dominant, and those guys that come in that have such a great wrestling base, like, you're going to have to figure out how to beat him. I mean, listen, we saw Masvidal outbox Diaz. Would it have really been smart for Kamaru Usman, who doesn't have quite the striking Usman obviously doesn't have quite the striking that even Diaz has. So, is he really going to go out there and try to stand and bang? No. Listen, you got to do what you have to do to keep the title. Like Nolan said, obviously, put some of that blame on Masvidal too. It's the two of them. It brings us back to Adesanya versus Romero, where everyone's like, oh, it's Adesanya. And then clips are coming out. We're like, wait, it's kind of Romero too. Like, there's a clip where he's standing there for 1 minute and literally not moving. So, it is a good point. It's both fighters, but I think the frustration comes from the fans wanted to see Masvidal go out there and just beat the living crap out of Usman and, put on this great performance like he did against Diaz, and Usman wasn't having it. So I think that's where a lot of that frustration comes from. And Usman definitely deserves more credit for being dominant and having such like a good base, in that you're not going to go out there and just blow his head off.
Yeah. I think also too, like, a lot of it falls on almost like, and you hate to say it, but like, it just doesn't seem like in today's day and age too, like, just being a good fighter, that really, I feel like, only does get you so far. You have to have that. That's why you have guys like, Conor McGregor, John Jones, those guys that kind of their attitudes and like what they kind of do that steals the headlines, outside of the cage. And I think that's where it's a little different too, because like when you do like look at the record too, like, I mean, obviously like Nolan said, like you're not going to like say that Usman is like a George St. Pierre yet, like does he have the potential? Sure. But like, as far as that, like GSP used to come out, in the gi and stuff, like he had things, he has the accent, like there's just like certain things that I think like drew people to him, where Usman, I don't think he really has that yet.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. And, another UFC 251 topic, Paige VanZant, obviously her last fight on her contract was a loss. And Dana White even kind of said at the press conference too that he wants her to test out that free agency. But for us, just, obviously we're not Paige, but if we were, what makes the most sense for her?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bellator seems just like such a layup. Obviously, her husband Austin Vanderford is with them, and seeing how happy he is on making that decision to go with Bellator and not go to the UFC or not hold off for a couple more regional fights before they signed him, seems like it's paid off. He seems very happy there, and seeing them at the different events, at Mohegan, and I remember talking to her down in Bridgeport, and like just seemed like she was very comfortable being there, and it seems like they have a good rapport with Bellator. And with the UFC not interested, I mean, it seems like she's literally made for their brand. I couldn't imagine that she would go anywhere else. It just seems so perfect to me. So that's what I'm expecting. I think she has to wait 90 days or whatever, before the UFC either declares that they're not going to re-sign her officially, or she waits out her waiting period or whatever. But I expect with Bellator being back that Paige VanZant in Bellator will be something that's announced by the end of 2020.
Yeah, it's funny because as I'm watching the fight, I'm thinking like she's here on this card, a little bit buried, fighting someone who I believe a lot of people expected her to lose to. And I'm thinking like Scott Coker would know what to do with Paige VanZant. He'd know where to put her. The fights, we'd probably see her fight 3 people who we've never heard of before fighting someone we might have seen a glimpse of her name somewhere. So I feel like Bellator is, like Nolan said, a layup. And for me, she has 2 options. It's retirement or it's Bellator. Like either Bellator is going to pay her the kind of money that she's expecting to get, or she really is going to pull the trigger and say, you know what, I can do something else that's going to give me a lot more money and it's better than fighting. And that could be an option too. I mean, the problem with Paige is that her record, especially now, I believe it's like 8-5. I mean, when you look at it, it's just not very impressive. And we kind of understand now that unless they're the right circumstances, okay, she's probably not going to be champion. People have been very critical of her fight style. It's very complicated because it feels like at this point, a lot of it is based on her marketability, right? The fact that she has a lot of endorsements, the fact that a lot of people find that she's attractive. Like she's entering a very tough position where it's like at some point, if your fight skills don't improve or don't look good in the cage in terms of the title and stuff, you're going to be kind of limited, even with the pay and sort of what your opportunities are in the MMA world.
Yeah. I think another side of it too is like we're all saying that, like, I mean, I agree with both of you guys as far as like Bellator too, and like Lucas, I think it was you that said that with Coker, like he's a guy that could probably push her, and that's like what I kind of took away from the post fight talk with Dana White too this week. It just seems like they're no longer interested in pushing her, and I'm just thinking if I'm Paige VanZant and I'm listening that, whether my husband's in Bellator or not, that's just something that I think I pick up, and I'm like, well, if they're not going to push me, I think I need to take my talents elsewhere.
Yeah, those are the kind of comments that you can't. I can't foresee like all of a sudden, she decides that she wants to go back to the UFC and have that hung over her head that her employer has said that they're essentially not interested in what she does. So yeah, I mean, I would say super safe bet that she's done in the UFC. I would lean towards her fighting in Bellator. It seems like a good pace, but yeah, like Lucas said, maybe retirement's the option too. Who knows? So I guess we'll see what happens in these coming weeks now that Bellator is relaunched. And I'm sure, if I'm down there next week at Mohegan, it's probably one of the things I'm going to ask Scott Coker. So we'll see.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing with Paige is I think she's very smart about like her brand. Like, how do people see me? Can I attract sponsors? And listen, you're going to get those sponsors in Bellator. They're going to be on your shorts. People are going to, eat clean, bro, on the fighters' asses. And I think people seem to enjoy. Like, there are big opportunities in Bellator that you're probably not going to get in the UFC, especially with sponsorships. And listen, when your boss is going out there saying like, yeah, fuck it, go try free agency, Scott Coker would never do that. You know, he's got such a way of cultivating a relationship that I think even for her brand, it would make the most sense to be with Bellator. And even the thing I was mentioning about the pay, I feel like just the sponsors alone, you could probably end up making up the difference so that she is getting paid more with the UFC if you count on those sponsors as well.
I think like Paige VanZant too, she's like what a like example of like the fight game too, because it seems like not that long ago she was kind of like on top of the world, and then now here we are, like, you know, Nolan was just saying too, like Dana White just does not seem that interested anymore.
Yeah, I that's really what it comes down to right there is, you know, Dana's interest in those comments. I think that sealed the deal.
Yeah. And Lucas, you talk about the brand and with Bellator too, and so I think it's kind of nice segue into our next topic, but the Venom deal. And I guess the simple question with this is just, you know, what does this deal kind of mean for them, and is this better than Reebok? Because I know Venom is a fight apparel. And we'll start with Lucas on this one.
Oh, I guess we're not going to guess first.
Oh, change it up.
Now, the thing that I'm kind of worried about is all we know right now is that it's just, okay, it's going to be Venom. Like they're like, and they're going to be paid more. You know, I'm going to need a little bit more than that, man. Like, I'd like to see some figures. Like, I feel like there's so much unknown. It seems right now like it would be better than Reebok. I mean, literally anyone would be better than Reebok with what we've seen. But I feel like what I like about Venom is they know MMA. Like, these guys were sponsoring fighters. Fighters were in their gear before Reebok. So that I like a lot. I feel like we can trust their products. We're not going to, unfortunately, we won't get no Gibbler, Melendez, and all that stuff. So they've got the potential to do something great. Is it going to be more money? I don't know. Like, does Venom really seem like it's worth more than, Reebok? I feel like if you find someone outside of MMA and you ask them, have you heard of Venom? Have you heard of Reebok? They'd be like, what the fuck is Venom? Is that the dude from Spider-Man? So that's kind of what worries me from a financial aspect. But I feel like we can trust that they know what they're doing in MMA. The biggest thing I'm hoping for is that they do what PFL does, where it's like, listen, you can't have Condom Depot all over your shorts, but we're going to give you like 2 sponsors and here's the place. So I've got a lot of hope on it, but until we get more information, I don't want to dive all in on that. I'm so happy about Venom until we see a little bit more of what they're going to do.
Yeah, I agree with everything pretty much Lucas just said, where, it is a fight brand. I think that does go a long way. I mean, I'm not going to say Reebok's products were bad. I really honestly don't know. The fighters all say they love, the Reebok, the feel of stuff. I wear Reebok for my running shoes and stuff. I like it, but who knows what like type of training gear and stuff. Who knows what it felt like to be in the cage with those on. I don't think we ever got an accurate answer, but Venom's a proven company that makes fight equipment. So I think that goes a long way. Optically, I'm sure to outside observer going from Reebok to then kind of saying, oh, it might be Under Armour, it might be Nike, or it might be Venom. It's just kind of like really out of place. And it almost seems like a step back in that regard, but who knows? Who knows what the financials are? Who knows what kind of backers Venom has? What kind of money they threw at the UFC? It could be like an overextension on their end where they are competing with Reebok and throwing a lot of money at the UFC. So who knows? I mean, it's really what it comes down to is I think it was a good move, and in terms of the stuff itself and the idea of it. But on the other hand, it also has the optics of hey, we're taking a step back from a mainstream brand here.
And one thing I wanted to throw out there is we saw the SHMO do his interview with Dana White. I don't know if you guys watched the full thing. I did, just out of curiosity. And he's going out there. Is it going to be Nike? What did he say? Like Under Armour, and let me throw out a dark horse, Venom. And I was like, what is he talking about? Why is he throwing Venom out there of all things? And everyone's like, oh, it could be Venom. And at first, like, what are you guys talking about? He just threw it out there just like that. And then we find out it is Venom. And I was like, wow. So for me, that was kind of scripted. Like, somebody told him ahead of time. Like, there's no way. How are you going to say Venom? Like, oh, let me just throw random Venom out there. Like, yeah, you think I'm some kind of dumbass? Maybe a little bit, but it's like, come on, man. Like, we would have figured it out. Like, that didn't really sit well with me. Like, he got that exclusive, which I have no problem with. Obviously, you get your sources and stuff. But the way it was done, it was kind of like, man, you just kind of took everybody for an idiot on that one, right? Like, let me just toss this name out there, Venom. Like, all right, man, wow, you're good.
Yeah, I actually didn't see that, but that's kind of just strange in general. I mean, you'd think from the UFC's end that they wouldn't necessarily want to have it leak in that way or have people start talking about it. And then for the SHMO, I mean, again, I think people are very critical of him. I like his whole shtick. I think he does something, again, like I said, different. But yeah, that is strange for his end too, because he's not presenting it like it's his own news. So yeah, that is a strange thing. I actually didn't see that. I'll have to go check that out again.
Yeah. I'm wondering. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to throw this out there because we did mention the SHMO. I have nothing against them. I just want to throw that out there before it sounds like
No. Yeah, I got you.
I'm just saying that situation was just, it didn't sit right with me. But listen, the SHMO, like, he did his podcast. He said, I'm doing the character because, I needed to do something that would make me stand out and work. So for that, I'm totally supportive. Like, whatever's going to get your name out there. And he's doing such a great job today with his branding, with his content. So shout out to him on that end. But I didn't like the Venom stuff that he did.
I'm wondering if Dana was trying to go for like the Fight Island effect, where he just mentions Fight Island, and then just like everyone else's like mind just go crazy. Like, maybe he's like, I'll throw Venom out there and see where people go with this.
There's definitely the uncertainty people have when they know information's coming their way, or like, oh, there's going to be a new something, a new interview, a new piece of breaking news, a new deal that the UFC is going to have, or Dana hinted at this. Like, people seem very much more interested in not knowing than they do actually like with the news that comes out. You know what I mean? Like, just the speculation aspect of it. So It's possible. I mean, try to build some hype and then, have the news come out. Maybe that was the move.
Yeah. And then for the first time, too, I don't think we've ever really done this, but we kind of have a bonus question that I kind of added last second. But I saw an interview with Laura Sanko was talking to Luke Thomas. I just thought this was interesting because a lot of people talked about the time difference in Abu Dhabi for these fighters, but I felt like a lot of people weren't talking about that kind of after the fact, like after the fights. And I think she even like in a quote said like the sleep schedule needed for Fight Island is effed. Like she was pretty upfront about it. And like, do you think that's kind of something that is getting like maybe like overlooked right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think talking to a lot of people that are out there, whether it be fighters or like I said, my coworker John Morgan, who's out there, everybody kind of has their own routine at this point. I think some fighters have done it different ways. Some staff out there have done it different ways. Like I know John has been trying to stay on the American clock because that's kind of what the fights are on too, right? So he's doing the media stuff in the early morning, which is afternoon for us, and then he'll stay up until local time. It will be through the night, and then he'll go to bed. So it's definitely, I'm sure it's confusing. I'm sure, sleeping when it's light out and being up when it's dark out is not comfortable for a lot of these guys. Especially with having to make that adjustment on, whatever it is, 5 days or, 5 days before your fight or whatever. So I'm sure that has been challenging. I'm surprised it's not talked about more. Seemed like everybody was really focused on, the heat. And then it turns out the fights are indoors. So yeah, I'd be interested to again, kind of go back and hear from some of these guys that lost these fights. Not trying to have them make excuses or anything. Did throw some of them. Maybe it is a legitimate gripe.
Man, let me tell you what, the jet lag and time difference, I often do, from France over to, East Coast, it's a 6-hour time difference. It doesn't seem like a lot when you say it's like just 6 hours, but it will fuck you up. Like the jet lag, the time difference, like it takes me a little bit to, to get everything right. So I imagine on such a huge time difference like that in Abu Dhabi, like it's going to fuck with you. I mean, even saying like, I'm going to stay on American time, it sounds easy, man. But when you got daylight outside and stuff, like your body, like when it detects light, it's like, no, you know what, man, we should be awake. There's light. That's why they talk about, blue light and things like that. So when I heard those guys say, like, I'm going to stay on American time, I'm like, good luck. Because that is hard. I don't know how you're going to do that, but good luck. So even when I heard like the UFC was like, we're going to do it at 7 a.m. to stay on American time. Obviously, I'm in France, so I was really rooting for it to be on a time where I wouldn't have to watch it at 4 a.m. Let me throw that out there. But it's tough, man. That time difference, even just the fact that you're traveling, all that stuff, the time difference, trying to stay on American time, trying to adjust. Maybe you don't adjust. Maybe like, fuck it, I'll just wake up early in the morning and do it. I think it does have a bigger effect than people realize. And I would be curious to talk to a fighter that we know, is like honest, like a Jared Gordon, to really kind of sit down and tell us like what effect that have for you. And you have John Morgan out there, which is interesting. I'd really be curious to know after he's done with it, looking back, like, was it really tough? Was it something he would do again? Like, I think it is, like Connor said, something we might be overlooking a little bit.
100%. He actually did a pretty good, for anybody that hasn't checked it out, he did a pretty good blog for the first week about adjustments and showing up at the airport and everything. And John's pretty funny, so it's a really easy read, and it does give you an interesting perspective and into some of the misery that comes with the travel and the time difference and stuff. But yeah, I'll definitely try to get an assessment from him, a further one on his sleep schedule and how much that threw him off to be able to. I mean, he's out there for all 4 events. So I'm sure maybe after a while he's adjusted to it, but it's tough, man. That guy travels a lot more than I would ever want, and I'll tell you that.
And that's like what stood out to me about Sanko too, because I think she said her call time was like 11:30 p.m. there, and then she said she was doing one of her last. It was like around 10 a.m. when the final fight was like taking place. So, I mean, that's like a very long day for anybody, and again, like it's such a small adjustment as far as like with these fighters. If you think if they're going through a similar schedule, it's like, well, they are doing this on 5 days notice, so like their bodies aren't getting acclimated to that. So it's just like it just was like insane.
It's crazy, man. Again, I like having my couple of trips a year and not having to do those international shows, and I think this is reinforced that for me.
Yeah, but he gets sounds not that bad of a trip.
Yeah, it's not quite Fight Island.
Not bad. Driving the car for 3 hours.
Yeah.
No, but I wish they would have done something a little bit similar to the NBA, where they brought in guys into the bubble and gave them some time. Like maybe you could have flown guys out in June to Abu Dhabi. Obviously it's a little bit of it's tough. You got to leave your family and stuff, but bring them out like a month early, get acclimate and stuff, and get ready, and then you can fight. But when you hear about Game Bread, like you've got 4 days to get to Abu Dhabi and back and all that stuff, and it's like, how's he doing that? I mean, the training camp stuff aside, it's like just from all the travel and everything, that's pretty crazy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if it works, great, but maybe we're gonna see with the more fights, like maybe there's a lot more, I don't know, maybe boring fights or things like that. We might see that there's a difference in the kind of quality of fights that we get out there.
100%. Yeah, I know. Even like some of the. I feel like they haven't necessarily. Again, I'd have to look into this more, but it seems to me that the flight schedules are kind of a little bit all over the place. Like I know, a couple of the guys for July 25th, a bunch of them, it seems like maybe even the whole card are already in Abu Dhabi, which that card's what, like, 10 days away. Yeah. And then there's other guys, like, granted it was a short notice fight, but Cody Stamann and Jimmy Rivera, couldn't do a media day with us in person out there because they had just got there and they were still in their 48-hour quarantine period. So I'd be interested to see, if these guys later in the schedule were allotted more time. Like I said, fighters from next weekend's card are there. So maybe that's something that they could do going forward. Give them, instead of the usual 4 or 5 days that they have at on scene to do their preparations, maybe double it, maybe give them 10. The UFC, that's their facility. I'm sure they have the space for, at least a couple cards worth of guys. So that would be something maybe would be a necessary change going forward.
Yeah. And like we mentioned in the beginning of the show too, obviously it's a fight night tonight, but big fight this weekend, Saturday. And before I let you guys go, just anything you're kind of looking forward to, just personally, with this UFC on the ESPN Plus 30 card?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they getting the international fighters back. We have a lot of different exciting guys out there. Obviously, the main event with Benavidez and Figueiredo doesn't interest me the most, just with the way that the first thing went down. But I guess having Joby be able to potentially finally get that belt after so many failed tries, is kind of a spectacle within itself. But beyond that, I mean, the undercard's pretty decent. I'm just pulling it up now on Tapology. I feel like my memory with all these cards have just like gone out the window. So unless Lucas wants to chime in and
jump in here. On the spot.
Man, UFC Fight Island for me is one gigantic card, and I'm trying to figure out like where it is. But I think we've got the return of Abdul Razak Al Hassan. It's going to be interesting. We've got Dan Ige versus Calvin Kattar, right?
Oh, you're asking about tonight's card or Saturday's?
I was asking about Saturdays, actually.
Okay. Oh, shit, yeah. Yeah, so it's one giant card for there are fights happening on an island, man. Like, just, pick some.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so for tonight's card, I think definitely Calvin Kattar, Dan Ige is the fight. Love it. And then Saturday's card, I think that the one that people probably don't know about that's excellent is Malcolm Gordon versus Amir Albazi. These guys are two of the best flyweights in the world. And definitely deserving of a UFC opportunity, and they're getting to make their short notice debut against one another. So that's if you're asking for a really hardcore under the radar pick, that's mine.
And since we're flexing the prospect muscles, I got to talk to Malcolm, and I believe he's named after Malcolm X. I think he shares like a birthday with him. I think he has like a Malcolm X tattoo. Like it's pretty crazy all the coincidences with him. But yeah, I think he was a good Canadian prospect, and the UFC can always use Canadian prospects. I know we don't have James Lynch on to plug that, but it's definitely important.
Yeah. One I'm looking forward to. I mean, I know we have the flyweights are going to be headlining that card, but the Askarov and Doja fight too. I just like that just because I feel like that kind of keeps that division moving, and those are two guys that I'm always kind of interested in watching.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, flyweights, man, they're back. I mean, they've signed, I don't know, probably a dozen or so now. It's super exciting to see, and Pantoja, if he wins this, I would assume he's going to be next, just judging by the fact that UFC President Dana White said that he was going to be the replacement fighter if the main event had fallen through. So obviously a pivotal fight there. If he's not the next guy, he's certainly throwing himself in the conversation with another W. And I'd assume the same goes for Askarov, a big win over a guy that was supposed to be a fill-in fighter. Big opportunity for both of them.
Yeah. And before we let you go, Nolan, anything you want to say?
No, not really. I mean, you guys can follow me on Twitter at MMA_Kings. I got, semi-active on Instagram at Nolan King MMA, and just follow MMA Junkie. Like I said, I might be down at Mohegan next week. We're kind of figuring out all the details of who's doing what. And other than that, follow our Fight Island coverage, and the train just keeps on rolling.
How about for you, Lucas?
Well, I'm not a company man like Nolan. I need that full-time money to start, plugging stuff like that. Listen, follow me on, Instagram, Twitter at Grandsire MMA. Definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, Lucas Grandsire. It's not that hard. And while we're here on the podcast, I get to announce it, which I already did on Twitter, but my return to the United States is official. August 22nd, your boy is back. Yeah. 3-year layoff coming for you, Uncle Sam.
And make sure to follow the show as well on Instagram and Facebook, Deep Water MMA Podcast on both platforms, and also on Twitter at MMA_Deep. And then my own personal Twitter is at CNorthrup732. Again, big fight tonight, and then also another one on Saturday. LFA returns again after a show on Friday. And that's it. Once again, thanks, Nolan, for joining us. Next week, we'll have another great guest. We're keeping them rolling here. We were talking about it last week, but it's kind of crazy that we're already 4 episodes in, 4 straight weeks here. And, I think that's it. Thanks to MyMMANews and also Eric for letting us do this. And thank you, Lucas. I don't thank you enough either. Let's give you a little plug today.
Thank you so much, man. You want to feel appreciated sometimes.
All right. Well, and I might be sick of you once you're back in the States, I guess. But.
That's right. Big return.
All right. Well, everyone, enjoy the fights tonight and this weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.